Hi everyone, my name is
Julie.
When I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with a very rare autoimmune disease called Juvenile Dermatomyositis. I'm 26 years old now, and I'm here to talk to you today about my journey. I wanted to talk about it because now that I'm an adult, I've noticed that, first of all, because my disease is so rare, there aren't that many people that I see on the internet talking about it. And not very many adults that had it as kids talk about it. I understand how isolating it can be to have a disease like this, and I can understand how hard it is when it's so rare and there's no information out there, especially with my sort of different case of it. So, if there's anybody out there who has a new diagnosis of this, or their child does, or a family member does, or a loved one does, I thought maybe I could give a perspective on it. It's been 10 years since my last relapse when I was a teenager. I've been in remission for 5 years. I'm on the other side of this. But that being said, what my disease has changed who I am forever. It's a part of me, and it's made me the person I am today. And to not give any credit to that, I don't think would be in service to me. So I want to talk about it today, and I want to make sure that my experience, if it can help anybody else or even one person, would be helpful, even though it's so rare. I don't know if anybody else out there has had a different chronic illness or something, but I hope what I have to say is helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get started. So, when I was 3 years old, I had a younger brother. He's a year and a half younger than me. And my mom was walking down the street with me, and she noticed that I was complaining all the time that I couldn't walk. And I just stopped walking. And she thought that I was jealous of my brother, and she thought that I was just being a pain in the butt. So, she got really mad at me and tried to get me home. Then she started noticing that I was walking funny, and I stopped being able to lift my legs to put them into my shorts. And then my gums started bleeding, and that's actually a sign of childhood leukemia. And my mom freaked out and took me to the next town over. I'm from a very small town in southwestern Ontario. So she took me to the next town over and got me to see a pediatrician who very thankfully had down a rotation through the rheumatology department of Sick Kids Hospital, which is where I was, spoiler alert, a patient for 15 years until I was 18 and I aged out of care. There, I was diagnosed with JDMS. I was not diagnosed, however, with an MRI or with a muscle biopsy because, quite frankly, my case had progressed so far that it wasn't necessary, and they went ahead and made the diagnosis without it. I started off on a regimen of prednisone, methotrexate, and IVIG. I was only on IVIG until for a few years, but I was on methotrexate for many, many years. I was on methotrexate from the time I was 3 years old till 10. I also, between the ages of 3 and 10, relapsed several times until I finally went into remission at 10 years old. I think I'm going to be doing another video about prednisone and steroids growing up and methotrexate growing up. It was very hard, but for now, I'll just say that as anyone who's been on that knows, it's very difficult. When I was 10, I went into remission, yay! And things were going great until I got mono when I was 15. And for anyone that's ever had mono, you would know that it causes a lot of fatigue, muscle weakness, pain. It can also cause joint rashes. Like JDMS, mono actually causes skin changes. So I had a blood test to confirm that I was diagnosed with mono. So when I had muscle weakness, changes in my skin, I didn't think anything of it, and I didn't think I was relapsing, because you think that when you're told that you have JDMS, you're told that if you can go into remission, you're not going to have it as an adult because your body changes so much, and you go through puberty and you go through those hormonal changes that are going to cause you to have to not react the same way. So when I was younger, my symptoms were that I had muscle weakness and pain in my legs, and I had the classic butterfly rash, and I'll try and insert some pictures as I go. But when I had mono, I had mostly weakness and pain in my upper body this time. And I actually had joint rashes on my knuckles, on my elbows, and my knees, not on my face. So I did not think I was relapsing. And this went on for months and months, and things were getting worse and worse and worse. I stopped being able to dress myself. I stopped being able to bathe myself. I stopped being able to go to school. I was in grade 10 and it was very, very hard. I was really only going to school once a week. I was doing my best. And that's when we finally had to call the hospital and say that they thought I was relapsing and we needed some help. When I got there, I wasn't a full-blown relapse. I was hospitalized and put on an IV of prednisone and put back onto methotrexate, and I was devastated. It's hard enough being a teenage girl, let alone when you're on prednisone, your face is puffing up, especially the intravenous prednisone. It happens so fast. I had no warning. It was a very hard time. It was a very dark time in my life, and I think that for any teenager listening to this, my heart goes out to you because I understand how difficult it can be. When you're a teenager, you just want to fit in, and I think that having something like JDMS is the epitome of not fitting in. I refused to go into a wheelchair at school. At this point, I was in a wheelchair. My parents were pushing me around. I could not walk at all. I was almost to the point where I couldn't feed myself. My muscle weakness got so bad. And so the wheelchair at school was out of the question. So I had to get the elevator key to use the elevator at school. I'm from a small town, so that just makes sense at home. And I remember going up to a substitute teacher that was teaching a class I was in, and I asked him if I could sit down in the class, and he said, he saw me walking up the stairs and he said, "Are you out of breath?" And I couldn't explain to him what was going on with me because I was so out of breath trying to walk up the stairs that I could barely talk. So where am I now? Well, that caused a lot of isolation in my life. Going through that at that age and being such a vulnerable age and being 16, it's very hard. It's isolating. Something that I really struggled with was feeling like my body had betrayed me. I felt like the one thing in your life that's supposed to be there for you is your immune system. That's supposed to be the ones fighting for you no matter what, and your own body is turning on you. It feels so violating. I remember having an English class to read a story about someone whose mother had a disability and she resented her mother for it. I remember being so upset and so triggered by this girl talking so badly about her mother, something I was so worried I was going to be doing to my future kids because I didn't know what the future held for me. And it was a very dark time. I definitely remember feeling very scared to get old because I knew what it felt like for your body to disintegrate right in front of you while you're totally in your own mind, and I was horrified. The way that I dealt with that is I went off to university. I very quickly realized that I was not going to be able to pick a career where I couldn't do it from a wheelchair, and I needed to pick something I could do in a wheelchair. From there, I started volunteering at Sick Kids Hospital because I wanted to give back to a community that gave me so much and helped my family so much with my experience. Once I graduated, I started volunteering a couple places, and especially on a palliative care unit where a lot of people are elderly. I understand what it's like to want to open up your own juice box or whatever that might be. I will never forget the first time that I put my own socks on when I relapsed when I was a teenager. I didn't get them on right. They were totally on wrong. They were not comfortable, but I will never forget that feeling that I knew I was getting better because I could put my own socks on. And so when I'm working with elderly clients, I will try my very best to make sure that they are as independent as possible because I know how rewarding it is to be able to do those things for yourself, and that's something I will never take for granted. I hope to one day be able to work with families and with patients that are elderly and help them through this sort of experience as well. Something that I think is important to discuss is the fact that just because I'm in remission right now doesn't mean I'm always going to be in remission. Especially with COVID-19 and this new virus that we don't know a whole lot about happening, as well as the fact that some kids are getting autoimmune responses to it. I've been very scared throughout this pandemic and been trying to isolate and wear masks as much as I possibly can to avoid getting it, because I don't know what the future holds. And I think that for anybody with what we have knows how scary it can be for the unknown. We don't know enough about this disease, I don't think, to say whether or not I'm going to relapse again. I hope not. That is a scary thing for me going forward, and that does affect how I date. That affects the kinds of people that I try and pick as partners. When the pandemic happened, I had to have a discussion with my partner at the time about the fact that if I ever relapsed and had to go on methotrexate again, I probably wouldn't be, I'd be signing myself up to not be able to have any kids for 5 years, if not longer, because of the course of treatment. I know I'm young, but that's scary. That's a really scary thing to have to know. And so I find it very hard when I'm dating to know when to disclose that I have this illness. And it affects who I am. It affects everything. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope that it was helpful. If you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments down below, and share this video if you want. I don't know who's going to see this. I'm not sure if anyone's going to see this, but be safe out there, everybody. I know it's really hard, and take care. Thank you for tuning in.